the importance of the US economy, an in-depth exploration of its global impact and potential collapse. Imagine waking up to a world where the financial engine of global trade has suddenly come to a halt. The stock market crashes, the banks freeze, and the US economy, long considered the backbone of the modern world, collapses. What would happen? The implications are far-reaching, not just for Americans, but for the entire planet. From currency values to the price of your morning coffee, the US economy influences nearly every aspect of daily life. But what if it all came crumbling down? In this video, we will explore the terrifying reality of a US economic collapse, its potential triggers, and the catastrophic ripple effects it could cause globally. Could the world economy survive it? Why is the US economy so important? The US is the global economic powerhouse. The United States economy represents about 25% of the world's total GDP. This makes it the largest national economy on the planet. It is the global leader in multiple industries, ranging from technology and entertainment to agriculture and advanced manufacturing. The US has been at the forefront of technological innovation, primarily through Silicon Valley, which houses some of the biggest tech companies such as Apple, Google, and Facebook. Hollywood, the heart of the entertainment industry, generates billions of dollars annually from film production and distribution worldwide. The US is a leading producer and exporter of oil, natural gas, and services, contributing significantly to global markets. The key sectors of the US economy, technology, entertainment, agriculture, finance, and international trades, are critical drivers of not just domestic growth, but global economic stability. Companies like Amazon, Tesla, and Microsoft are not just American giants, they are multinational corporations with an immense reach. From consumer electronics to digital services and e-commerce, these industries help shape global markets, create jobs worldwide, and drive innovation. If the US economy faltered, the effects would reverberate far beyond its borders, creating widespread disruption in international markets and trade. The US dollar plays a central role in the global economy. It is not merely America's currency, it is the world's currency. Around 60% of international trade is conducted in dollars, and the majority of global reserves are held in US dollars. This gives the US a unique advantage in the global financial system, allowing it to borrow at lower interest rates and maintain its position as a global economic leader. The dollar's dominance ensures liquidity in international trade and investment, but it also means that any disruption in the US economy could send shockwaves through financial markets across the globe. Many US-based companies operate on a global scale. Tech giants like Apple and Google rely on international supply chains, production facilities, and markets. US financial institutions have deep ties to foreign markets, and US agricultural products are a crucial component of global food security. A collapse of the US economy would not only cause immediate financial turmoil in the US, but also trigger a global supply chain breakdown, leading to shortages, price increases, and economic destabilization in countries around the world. Historical comparison. The British Empire's economic decline. History provides a useful lens through which we can understand the potential consequences of a US economic collapse. The decline of the British Empire after World War II offers a stark example. At its peak, the British Empire controlled vast territories around the world and was a dominant economic power. Following the war, the UK's economy struggled to maintain its global influence, leading to the decline of the British pound and a shift in the global balance of power. While the US is not in a similar situation today, the collapse of its economy could have comparable effects on global trade and political dynamics. Imagine a world global trade without the US economy. A world without the US economy would face a severe disruption in industries across the globe. Emerging economies would struggle to fill the void left by the US, and many countries that rely heavily on US exports would face recessions. The entertainment industry, technological innovation, and global trade would all suffer immensely. Countries that depend on the US dollar for trade and reserves could experience massive inflation, while industries like agriculture and manufacturing could see a steep decline in productivity due to supply chain disruptions. The global economic landscape would be forever changed. What could be the triggers of a US economic collapse? Unsustainable national debt. One of the most significant risks to the US economy is its ballooning national debt. Currently standing at a staggering $33 trillion, the US debt has reached unsustainable levels. This debt, which has been steadily increasing for decades, is largely the result of government spending on defense, social programs, and economic stimulus packages. If the US continues to borrow at this pace, it risks defaulting on its obligations if interest rates rise sharply or creditors lose confidence. A debt default could trigger a financial meltdown that would not only destabilize the US economy, but also ripple across global markets. De-dollarization, a threat to the US dollar's dominance. The US dollar's dominance as the world's reserve currency is increasingly being challenged. Countries such as China, Russia, Brazil, India, and Iran have been exploring alternatives to the dollar, seeking to conduct international trade in other currencies and planning to establish their own common currency. If the world loses faith in the US dollar and shifts to alternative currencies, the US could face severe inflation and a collapse of its financial system. This process, known as de-dollarization, could lead to a loss of American financial power and a decline in global demand for US Treasury bonds. Financial market bubbles, a repeat of 2008. The US has a history of financial market bubbles, periods of speculative growth in assets like housing or technology that eventually burst, causing widespread economic turmoil. The most recent example of this was the 2008 financial crisis, which was triggered by a housing bubble and reckless lending practices. While the market has largely recovered since then, the potential for another speculative bubble remains. A bubble in real estate, technology, or even cryptocurrency could trigger another financial collapse, sending shockwaves through the US economy and global financial markets. The US economy is also vulnerable to external shocks such as geopolitical conflicts, cyber attacks, or global pandemics. The ongoing trade tensions with China, the threat of cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, and the uncertainty surrounding future pandemics all pose risks to the stability of the US economy. These events could disrupt global supply chains, cause massive market volatility, and lead to a slowdown in economic growth. The 1997 Asian financial crisis, which originated in Thailand and spread throughout Asia, is an example of how external shocks can trigger a global financial crisis. In the event of an economic collapse, one of the first things to happen would be a freeze in the banking system. ATMs would go offline, credit card payments would be declined, and access to savings accounts would be restricted. A sudden collapse of the financial system would create chaos, leaving individuals and businesses unable to access their funds. The US government would likely attempt to intervene with emergency measures, but the lack of liquidity and trust in the system would make recovery extremely difficult. Unemployment would skyrocket in the aftermath of an economic collapse, possibly reaching levels not seen since the Great Depression. As businesses shut down, industries grind to a halt, and supply chains break down, millions of Americans would lose their jobs. The unemployment rate could exceed 30%, with entire sectors of the economy, such as retail, manufacturing, and transportation, coming to a standstill. The loss of income would trigger a cascade of social and economic issues, including poverty, homelessness, and widespread despair. Inflation could spiral out of control in the event of an economic collapse. As the value of the dollar plummets, the price of everyday goods, such as food, fuel, and housing, would skyrocket. Hyperinflation would make basic necessities unaffordable for most Americans, leading to widespread panic buying and hoarding. Shortages of essential goods like food, medicine, and fuel would become commonplace, exacerbating the suffering of the population. The economic collapse would create a vicious cycle, as rising costs further erode people's purchasing power and confidence in the system. Civil unrest could erupt in response to the economic chaos, as people struggle to survive and adapt to the new reality. Social services like healthcare, education, and law enforcement would be severely impacted, leading to further instability and potential breakdowns in order. The US could descend into a period of social collapse, where trust in institutions is shattered, and the very fabric of society begins to unravel. The collapse can trigger the global ripple effects, the domino effect, trade disruptions, and impact on global supply chains. The United States is a major importer of goods, and many countries rely on US consumers to drive their economies. A collapse of the US economy would cause a significant drop in demand for foreign products, leading to recessions in countries like China, Germany, and Mexico. These nations would struggle to cope with the loss of US market demand, resulting in widespread job losses, factory closures, and a decline in global trade. The interconnectedness of the global economy means that disruptions in the US would have cascading effects on countries across the globe. Foreign banks and investors who hold US debt or assets would suffer massive losses in the event of a US economic collapse. The resulting financial chaos would lead to a global financial crisis, with banks collapsing, markets plunging, and economies teetering on the brink of collapse. The US dollar's role as the world's reserve currency means that many countries hold substantial amounts of US debt. If the US defaults or experiences hyperinflation, these countries would face severe losses, leading to financial instability in regions like Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The economic fallout from a US collapse would not only lead to financial instability, but also trigger political and social unrest across the globe. The 2008 financial crisis demonstrated how economic turmoil can lead to political instability, particularly in countries with weak economies or fragile governments. In Europe, for example, the financial crisis led to the rise of populist political movements, austerity measures, and social unrest. A US economic collapse would likely have similar effects, exacerbating political divisions and potentially leading to regime changes in vulnerable countries. The economic collapse of the US could also lead to a migration crisis, with millions of Americans and people from neighboring countries seeking refuge in other parts of the world. As unemployment and poverty increase in the US, large-scale migration could occur, further destabilizing neighboring countries like Canada and Mexico. Countries in the developing world, already struggling with economic issues, would find it even more difficult to absorb large numbers of refugees, creating a humanitarian crisis. The long-term consequences can be a new world order and the rise of new superpowers, such as China, alongside of the BRICS countries. In the aftermath of a US collapse, new superpowers would likely emerge to fill the vacuum. China, with its growing economic and political influence, could step up to assume a leadership role in the global order. The European Union, with its economic and political clout, might also rise as a major player on the world stage. These regions would seek to reshape the global economic system, but the balance of power would be fundamentally altered, and new geopolitical tensions would arise. A US economic collapse could accelerate the adoption of decentralized systems, such as cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. As the world loses faith in traditional financial institutions, individuals and businesses may turn to digital currencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum as alternatives to the US dollar. Regional alliances and alternative reserve currencies may also emerge, further fragmenting the global financial system. The collapse of the US economy could spur a technological revolution as new systems are developed to replace traditional financial structures. Blockchain and decentralized finance, DeFi platforms, could become mainstream, offering greater financial freedom and transparency. However, these new systems would also present challenges, particularly in terms of regulation, security, and equity. The long-term consequences of a US economic collapse would be felt for decades. From the loss of jobs and income to the dismantling of social services, the human cost would be immense. Education systems would crumble, healthcare services would deteriorate, and social safety nets would be stretched beyond capacity. The collapse could leave a permanent scar on future generations, as access to resources and opportunities becomes limited. Could it really happen? While the US economy faces numerous risks, a total collapse is unlikely due to its inherent resilience and the interdependence of global economies. However, complacency is dangerous. As we have seen throughout history, economic crises can happen unexpectedly and with little warning. Preparedness and adaptability will be key to navigating future challenges. The resilience of both individuals and institutions will determine whether the US economy can weather future storms without triggering a global catastrophe. The collapse of the US economy would be a global disaster, reshaping nations and lives in profound ways. The lesson to be learned from this exploration is that no system is invincible. The resilience of individuals, governments, and institutions in the face of economic challenges will be the key to mitigating the effects of a collapse. As we reflect on the potential risks and consequences, it is important to consider our own role in the global economic system and think about how we might navigate an uncertain future. The collapse of the US economy is a worst-case scenario, but one that serves as a reminder of the fragility of global systems and the importance of resilience in an ever-changing world. What do you think? Could the collapse of the US economy really happen? Are we too dependent on the US economy? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to keep exploring the questions that matter most.